Have you heard about peptides but have no idea what they really are? Or you have heard of them and you're just looking for a clean, reliable, high-quality source for research peptides? Stick around and I'll address both right now. Hey guys, Dr. Rob here. I'm the founder of Biosim Peptides, and I just wanted to try to make as short of a video as I can to go over kind of the basics of peptides. When I talk to people, around the world, I find that most people have either heard the word peptide, but really have no knowledge after that word, or they never heard about them at all. So I wanted to create like a really, really basic video just so people understood what we're talking about. So what is a peptide? A peptide is literally a chain of amino acids. Okay, I think we all know what amino acids are. I think we all know what protein is, right? When I say protein, you think steak, chicken, milk, right? A protein is thousands of, or hundreds or thousands of amino acids that are kind of folded on each other in a three-dimensional shape. That's a protein. A peptide is a chain of amino acids that are linked together through what are called peptide bonds. You don't need to remember that, but it's basically a chain of amino acids. So you think to yourself, well, isn't that just a tiny protein? Not really, because it serves completely different function than the big three-dimensional folded one. So the way peptides work is there are like 300,000 different peptides in your body that are sending signals and messages to different organs and tissues. Why is that important? Well, because as you get older, as with every part of your body, those messages become quieter. And as they become quieter, the effects decline. And as they decline, everything declines. The reason why we're interested in peptides is because we can turn the volume on those messages back up. I am a doctor, but this is not medical advice, okay? This is just for informational purposes only. So I'm kind of speaking hypothetically about treating them because these cannot be prescribed or dispensed or taken by humans. So I'm just trying to speak in like the theoretical sense of what peptides can actually do for people, okay? Let's look at it like this. We've got these small chain amino acids that we can synthesize, right? And as we get older, what happens? Well, there's a couple major things that happen. Number one is something called insulin resistance. So I think everybody's heard of insulin, right? When you think insulin, you think diabetic. Why? Well, there's something called a type 1 diabetic. This is somebody who is born without the ability to produce insulin. What is insulin? Why is this so important? Just think of insulin as the storage hormone, okay? Just think storage. So insulin sees sugar in your blood and it's like, we got to get that out of here. We got to put it somewhere. We got to find some place for it. So if your muscles are depleted because you've been exercising, it'll send it to your muscles. If your muscles are not depleted because you've been sitting on the couch being lazy and you're just eating a bunch of Skittles, then it takes that sugar and it's like, all right, we got to do something with this. And it sends it to your belly and it gets turned into fat, right? So insulin is the storage hormone. Now, insulin resistance, what that means is that your body kind of stops listening to the message that insulin is creating. So when that sugar is sitting there in your blood and insulin is like, guys, what are we doing? Like, let's get this out of here. It's in the way. Those little shuttles aren't paying attention. They're sitting there on their lunch break, just reading the paper, and they're like, yeah, I'll get to it, relax. And the sugar is just sitting there. So that creates lots of problems. Okay, that creates all kinds of inflammatory problems. In terms of dementia and Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's, everybody thinks that those are just caused by like natural aging of the brain. Not at all. Okay, so I talked about diabetes type 1. That's when you're born without the ability to create insulin. Diabetes type 2 is kind of what's called acquired diabetes. And this is when you're usually very overweight, very unhealthy. You induce insulin resistance by being so unhealthy that you are creating. So even though your body's making insulin, you're so resistant to it that you're almost like that diabetic who isn't making any insulin. So you're inducing diabetes. Alzheimer's and dementia are classified as diabetes type 3 because they are caused by insulin resistance in your brain. This isn't just you're getting older and your brain is getting older, so it's decaying and it's not working anymore. No. This is your brain's inability to metabolize glucose and function. So if you can control your insulin resistance, you are literally decreasing and reversing your odds of dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. So this is how significant, this whole cascade is. And that's only insulin resistance. I haven't even really mentioned inflammation, right? Systemic inflammation. What that means is you sprain your ankle, it gets inflamed, it's really sore, that stinks, right? You put ice on it, it heals, inflammation goes away. But there is systemic inflammation. What that means by systemic is it's the level of inflammation that your entire body is trying to suffer and tolerate by these certain cells that run through your body, causing it. And again, this is something that when the whole machine starts to work less efficiently and the whole machine of your body starts to have problems, this inflammation level goes up and goes up and goes up. The third main issue that happens when you get older, and I'll try not to be too sciencey here, but there is a part of every cell, every single cell, called the mitochondria. It's a little organelle that exists within the cell. Everybody calls it the powerhouse of the cell. It does a lot more than that, but for the purposes of this video, consider it the engine of the car, okay? If you have a car and it's like getting a little bit older, if the tires have low air pressure, it can drive. If the brake pads are thin, it'll still stop. If the transmission isn't so great, it might clunk around when it shifts, but it can still drive. The engine has a problem, car's not going anywhere. And if the engine has a problem, you know right away. If the mitochondria of your cells starts to degrade and it starts to malfunction, the entire system starts to break down. So these are the three main things as we get older that cause us to age and cause us to feel older, right? Insulin resistance, inflammation, and mitochondrial dysfunction. Peptides have been shown in research to radically improve all three of these. So when you look at this list of peptides and you see all these weird alphabet soup, is BPC, TB, SLU, SS, like it's what, why can't they just give them normal names? There's an explanation why, where each name comes from, but it does get very confusing. There is no logical, rational, organized system for why peptides are named what they are. There is an explanation why each individual one is named what it is. But there is a group of peptides that will work on inflammation. There's a group that work on insulin resistance. There's a group that work on mitochondrial function. And these three things, by the way, are interconnected with each other. So as mitochondria function better, your inflammation tends to go down. Your insulin resistance tends to go down. And it's like this cyclical improvement of the entire machine. It's very hard to have high systemic inflammation when your mitochondria are working well and when you are insulin sensitive. Insulin sensitivity is a good thing. Okay, usually sensitivity is not a good thing, makes you cry at movies, things like that, but insulin sensitivity is a good thing. Basically, that is a very, very quick, very, very simple, basic explanation. What peptides do, how they're different than drugs, because they naturally occur in the body. Therefore, if an animal were to take peptides, the therapeutic range is very wide because you don't have, like the Tylenol killing your liver, you don't have that. There is no toxic byproduct of peptides that's going to damage your liver, damage your heart, or damage this or damage that. They are naturally occurring in your body. You're just gonna have a little more than the desired effect, and that's it. It's not gonna really affect anything, okay? And that's with almost all peptides. Obviously, there's a few that are very strong and you can't just take as much as you want, but the therapeutic window is still much, much wider than it is with drugs, so to speak. And even then, any side effects that have been noted in research are reversible. These aren't like damaging, permanent, irreversible things that happen. So why did I start Biosim? I've been researching peptides for probably 7 or 8 years, and I've always been a health junkie. I was a personal trainer years ago. I had several champion clients. I've just been very kind of almost borderline obsessed with wellness and longevity my whole life. So when I started researching peptides, I wanted to learn as much as I could. I just didn't want to, trust someone else. I wanted to really understand what was happening with them. So over the course of those years, then that started to branch out and I started doing some consulting. And I realized pretty quickly that it was very difficult to find a consistent, reliable, well-priced source of research peptides. If you could find a reliable source, they were very expensive. If you found a well-priced source, then their products would drop off and then come back on and then drop off again. And then, I just decided that this was kind of a passion of mine and I wanted to, create a reliable, consistent source. So I did what was needed for that. And that's where Biosim came from. So you'll see several dozen different compounds. They've all been researched for different purposes. And I'll be making future videos with regards to some of those, just so people can try to get a better understanding. But in terms of, why you would want to be interested in peptides, you would want to learn about them and use them in your own personal research to address those three main things. The inflammation, the mitochondrial function, and, insulin resistance. And obviously, when these compounds have been researched on animals, when those three things work better, then that obviously leads to more muscle, less fat, definitely better cognitive function, better organ function of multiple different organ systems, heart, lungs, kidney, liver, everything. So it's a really exciting field and something that, I'm glad I got into because I feel like this was really needed in the space. Send me a message, leave a comment, ask a question. Like I said, I can't give actual medical advice, but I'll answer anything I can to the extent that I can. And thanks for stopping by.